What's up, guys, and welcome back to the infamous project. My apologies for not getting a video out on the weekend. It was all for good reason. Had some family birthdays going on, the weather was beautiful, and I've just been hustling like mad to try and get ready to give myself a holiday. Now, I've been going 100 miles an hour since I got back from Dubai June of last year, and it's almost been a year already, and I couldn't even rhyme off the amount of cars that I've gone through and that I've worked on and the projects and everything else. And it's just time for a break. So I am going to be heading south down to Texas to my place down there. Going to finally see some of the cars that I bought that I haven't seen yet in person. Go through, do some inventory, try and organize some things, get some tools set up, play with some cars, detail some stuff, maybe drive some of them, and just relax a little bit. So it'll probably be about a month's time or so. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be a true breath of fresh air with all the restrictions that are still in place up here in Canada. I'm truly excited to get down there and just try and feel some normality again, which for anybody who's watching from Canada, you're going to know exactly what I mean. And like I said, I'll be back for the rest of the summer here. Already got people booking some stuff in that want to come and get some work done to their cars. So if you are interested, it's going to be mid to late summer, but feel free to reach out if you need any work done. You can see behind me here, got the 91 DECH Coupe up in the air. Finally wrapping up some of the suspension stuff. Managed to get those lower control arm bolts out with the air hammer. And thankfully, you know, that air hammer was here. You're only as good as your tools. If I was stuck, you know, on the ground in a driveway, it wouldn't have gone so well for me. So I managed to get those bolts out. We're getting the lower control arms installed now, and we'll go through some of the suspension stuff and get the brakes bled since installing the DECH floating rotors. So I'll kind of go over, I've been taking a couple of snippets of things here or there as I've been trying to hustle through. You know, we got the hood buffed and well, got the hood for tax return painted, cleared, wet sanded, buffed, all those things. It's reinstalled on the car. The car's down at the alignment shop, so it's getting picked up in 2 days. The blue car gets picked up tomorrow, and I'm trying to get this one done so it can go to my friend's place in storage over there, so it's not taking up room in the shop. And managed to get out on the bike and enjoy that over the weekend. So again, weather's been great here, so that's just been awesome to deal with. So that's where things are at. So stay tuned. You'll see a little bit of the hustle and what's been going on over the past couple of days, most importantly, the past week. And let's get this thing buttoned up and back on the ground again. So I might have to put the rear up. Oh, shit. All right, guys, as you can see, got the white car started up here. There's no brakes, so I'm really cautious about how I'm maneuvering things around, just because we swapped the front calipers, so need to bleed everything out. Got our 2x4s down here because the car is sitting extremely low now, so to be able to get the arms underneath, the car needs to be a little bit higher. So I'm gonna get this on the lift and see if I can get this thing in a driving state before I leave. So part of the hustle of getting everything done. So let's try and get this thing on here and get that rear end sorted out in terms of the control arms, and bleed out the brakes, and panhard bar might need to wait. I don't think there'll be enough time for that, but we'll see. I think my boots in there holding up. Can they make it on all four?
Yeah.
Well, that's impressive.
You just, but
it'll do. All right, guys, so it's not all bad. Managed to actually knock those bolts out with the air hammer. So definitely glad we had one of those here, because I don't think I would have got it out any other way. It probably would have resulted in having to cut something. So now it's just a matter of supporting the rear diff, which I've done here, and now going to take out the bolts that are holding in the lower control arm into through these DECH grabbers. So if you guys are wondering what these grabbers do, you can see they bolt on to the main housing of the differential here. And the original hole for the lower control arm is probably about here. And what you do with the grabbers is you drill a new hole in the arm just pretty much right at the base, and then drill a new hole up here. You bolt the grabber in place, and then your lower control arm gets relocated a little bit downwards. And what that does is it changes the orientation of the arm, and ultimately it helps with traction and overall benefits your suspension setup. The other thing that it does is also lowers your car a little bit more by dropping it down. I'm gonna go ahead, take this lower bolt out here. That'll allow us to drop out these factory lower control arms. Then we're gonna put our other style in. And I looked at the panhard bar, which is sitting on the ground down there, and gonna have to cut the exhaust in order to just make life easier to bolt that in place, which I have no problems with. This exhaust, if you haven't noticed, is a complete hack job. You can see here where it's been beat and rubbed against the rear diff. You can see all the different sections. Like, look at this. And this isn't me. Somebody hacked out I had like a SLP style mufflers in this guy, and somebody cut that section out and did some really creative welding back here. Doesn't even have the exhaust hanger on this side. They welded some contraption here that's not even holding anything, so I'm gonna go ahead and grind this off. This side is a bit better, but it's still bad. So needless to say, I am probably going to replace everything from that H-pipe backwards, because it's almost just an embarrassment. So if you guys have picked up on that, no need to worry. I'm going to get that fixed. So not sure what happened. I actually had a different H-pipe on the car when I sold it as well. It didn't have cats, so clearly they went to something that has catalytics on it. But hey, that's the name of the game, right? We're gonna get it right. That's the important thing. And so for today, I think it's just gonna be swapping out the control arms, bleeding all the brakes, making sure what we did in the front is good. As you know, I put the DECH floating rotor setup up there with new braided lines. So I'll probably see, actually I'm not gonna swap the braided line up here yet, because I actually have rear DECH brackets getting reproduced. I was hoping they were gonna be ready before I went south so that I could do a 4-bolt disc in the rear. And I just wanna keep everything 4-bolt because it's gonna hold true to all the DECH parts from back in the day. So some of you guys are wondering, you know, yes, there is better technology and newer stuff. I could put Cobra brakes in the rear. You know, I could do an aftermarket setup like SSBC or Willwoods or whatever. But in this case, I want to keep with the DECH theme. So that's about it for that. I'm going to go ahead, get these bolts out and get this wrapped up. Hopefully the car will be drivable so we can test it out on the new suspension and see how many rubs we have. And from there, the car's going to sit until I get back. Guys, you can see right here how the spring perch is kind of beat down. The reason why is because this car was the first car that I actually prototyped my own coilover, well, it wasn't coilover, but adjustable spring perch design. I actually had perches with the threading locking nuts that were mounted on here. So I had a big bolt coming through the bottom side, and it was a perch, a threaded perch here that you could adjust the height of the spring accordingly. And they actually came off, there were a Bilstein perch that were used in an E36 BMW, and it was the first time that I had done it. So it allowed me to make adjustments to the rear of my suspension. I did that back in 2007, 2006. And funny enough, it's the same design that they're using today. However, they're putting the perch at the top, which is actually a good idea because it keeps the spring in place. Since the perch has material, so it keeps the spring from potentially falling out when you jack the car up. So fun fact right there. New lower control arm here. These came out of another car that I had around. They got adjustments on there with some Heim joints and new poly bushings. So the one thing that I need to do some research on is I know Maxim Motorsport doesn't like you using solid mounts with their panhard bars. So I need to reach out to the son of Derek Hansen, late founder of DECH Motorsport, and get his opinion if it's okay to run this style with the panhard bar in the back, and go from there. But otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead, get these bolted in, and it's gonna clean things up, and we'll have fresh new hardware that doesn't need to get pounded out with an air hammer. So, got our control arms here, all new hardware, and these are just gonna go right in where the factory ones were. So removing these guys was a lot easier than installing them. Reason being, you have to slide the bolt through, put a spacer on, slide it through the heim joint on the control arm, then squeeze your other spacer in there, which I'm trying to do right now. So it's not going to be the end of the world. We're halfway there. All right, so we got all of the bolts started. Gonna go ahead now and get everything tightened up, get our springs put back in place, and get our rear sway bar. Actually, I'm gonna run that through the Varsol tank, get that cleaned up. If it needs a coat of paint, that'll now have to get bolted on versus the little speed clips for the bolts to run through, and make sure everything's tightened up and be able to put this guy back down on the ground. All right, guys, here is the blue DECH Coupe on air, and it's ready to go. It's just short of a wash, but everything else has been done. It's been part of the hustle and getting everything ready. You can see the quarter window moldings turned out really nice here. I did do them on the car, so any of you guys who are wondering or curious about that, it can be done. The reason why I didn't want to take them out is because when the car got painted, they had masked around the molding. So it would mean having to cut with a razor blade and making sure that there was no oversprayed paint along the edges, because you would risk when you're pulling the glass out to potentially peel some of that paint back, and I didn't want to do that. So moldings all done, nice here. And you notice the only thing that's not done is the hood is still the carbon fiber one. The reason for that, like I said, I was told the car was Viper Blue, went and got it scanned, nothing came up, gave them a bunch of information. They couldn't find anything locally here to get this paint to match. And the last thing that I would have wanted was to spray that hood and it not match. I've got the buyer lined up with Boogie, my painter in Scarborough, Ontario, and Boogie's got all of his mixing equipment and paint and everything at his shop, so he's going to be able to match and maybe do a couple little spray outs and make sure that the paint matches 100%. So that's kind of the last thing on the ticket. Just to recap on some of the things that we did to the car, you know, we swapped out the tail lights, got rid of the LEDs, swapped out the headlights, and got rid of all the gauges inside of the car and a rat's nest of wiring. So now it's super nice and clean in here. No more monster tack. Got rid of the gauges in the center vent, so now you can actually feel some ventilation blowing there. The car doesn't have AC, but you know, if it's raining, you want to get some good airflow going. We mounted the air ride controls in this vent over here, and that was pretty much it for the interior. Getting all of that wiring and the rat's nest out from underneath, that was a huge feat, so I'm really happy about that. There was twist ties actually holding the wiring up underneath the dash, so I'm glad that that's out. I should have got some of that footage. It would have been interesting for you guys to see yet another car and how people really bastardized some wiring. So underneath the hood, cleaned some things up, did a service, checked the timing. It was running at about 10. I bumped it up to 13. Adjusted the TPS to 1 volt. We changed out that water pump gasket that was nasty and extracted that broken bolt that we found. Put a brand new belt on it, because the belt was all cracked. So that's been cleaned up. Again, miscellaneous wiring underneath the hood was done. Rad was flushed as a result of doing the water pump gasket. So everything there is nice and tidy and good. Cleaned up a couple little things on the underside of the car, made sure the air lines were all, you know, out of any moving parts' way. And that's about it. So just gonna get this thing cleaned, and buyer's gonna come pick it up, and the blue DECH Coupe is gonna be on its way to the new owner. All right, guys, so the last piece of the equation here is getting the new sway bar end links installed. Since the car is gonna be so low, the taller ones, you can see the sway bar right here, control arm here. Got this jack post underneath the control arm, putting weight and load on this arm to get it up. And you can see the distance here, how short it is. So if we had a normal end link, it would actually bottom out. It would potentially buckle and bend because it'd be too long. So I got shorter ones, and you can find them on Amazon, any aftermarket part supplier, because they are fairly generic. So we're gonna go ahead and put the shorter guy in here, and then that's gonna have our suspension all buttoned up. The rear, we got the sway bar installed, got our brackets and arms all cleaned up. So that's all good to go. Looking nice and fresh. Brakes are all bled, so we'll be able to stop, take this thing for a little test drive, see how it rides. Here's one of the stubby links. I actually had this on another car at one point that got raised up, so it's going to get reused. So on a normal end link, the sleeve is probably about that tall. These are about half the length. All right, so our sway bar end links are bolted in place. Got our coilovers installed. Got our DECH floating rotors with our Corvette caliper setup going on in the front here. New braided lines. The DECH G-load brace, which was there already to begin with. So that's installed, and now I'm kind of chuckling because I can actually see where they bent the H-pipe to clear that brace. So it's going to be something else that I'm going to want to clean up when the exhaust gets freshened up. And the rear, everything's good. Coilovers, lower control arms, cleaned up our rear sway bar, cleaned up our rear DECH grabbers, and got our Raceland shocks installed back there as well. So I'm gonna put the wheels on, put this thing on the ground, see how everything fits, take it for a little test drive, see how many rubs we have, and that's gonna be a wrap until I get back. So let's check it out. So a little recap on what we accomplished here on the 1991 DECH Coupe. Didn't get everything on the list that I wanted to do, but definitely made some really good headway. So got the full set of Raceland coilovers installed front and rear, and even did a couple little tweaks so we could get it down even lower. I'm assuming it might settle down just a tad bit more, which is fine. I'm really hoping that it happens more in the front, because the front is just a hair taller than the rear. Maybe when I'm sitting in it, it's leveled out, but we'll see what happens after doing some joyriding. You can see we got the DECH floating rotor setup installed in there with the braided steel lines, and got everything bled out, and super happy with the way that these turned out. And it's a really rare piece to have on the car. Again, that's a Corvette rotor, and I believe a Corvette PBR caliper that was used back in the day, with an original 4-lug hub that they machined the face of the rotor off, and made it with, or left the studs in there, which allows it to have or keep as a floating rotor setup. At least that's what I'm understood to believe on how exactly they did it. So in the rear, we put the baseline lower control arms in, had to air hammer those lower control arm bolts out, gave our rear sway bar a little bit of a touch-up paint job, and everything's buttoned up in the back there. Now I do have DECH brackets for the rear to be able to do disc back there, and they just got finished the other day. Didn't have enough time to get them on. No big deal. We also didn't get the panhard bar on. The exhaust needs to come out for that, which I like the sound, but you probably saw the way that the exhaust piping and everything was done, and the tips are crooked. So that exhaust needs to get redone. So when I get back, we will do the four-wheel or the rear disc setup. I'll be changing out the master as well, putting in the adjustable proportioning valve. So there'll be a video on that. We'll be redoing that exhaust, and we'll be buttoning up what's left of the stereo system because the trunk is still a little bit of a disaster. So that's where we're at. Gonna go now, take this guy for a bit of a drive because it's gonna go sit in storage while I'm away down south. And then when I get back, be able to button up everything else that needs to be done to the car. So let's go for a ride. All right guys, so we're actually just leaving the alignment shop. Dale came along with me, and tax return is right over there. Drove the car about 10 miles and just taking it over to my friend's place to get stored while I'm away down south. The car ride's rough. These Racelands are cranked all the way down, and I want to say it rides rougher than my black, the Stalker Vert. Now, it's mostly in the rear where the roughness is. The difference between this Raceland setup and the Stalker Vert is that the Stalker Vert actually has my homemade coilover setup in the rear, which is my own perch and my own spring setup, which is cut and adjusted with my perch. And it actually just has stock shocks in the back, and the rear on that rides softer than this one. This one's pretty harsh. So I might have to put the rear up. Oh shit. I think I just ran out of gas. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's it. I can probably push around this corner.
Want somebody to steer or anything?
Should be alright if I can just get around the corner. Nobody hits me. That was interesting. Whew. Got my workout in. I don't think my gas gauge is working. So it really seems like I ran out of gas, and also sounds like this starter gets heat soaked. So I'm gonna call Dale and hopefully get a can of gas over here and get rescued. All right. Was entertaining. Nothing like running out of gas in your Foxbody. Can't even remember the last time I did that. Actually, it was in the red turbo car, I do remember now. I got to where I was going and the car wouldn't start from there. So what happens with all these gas gauges and their inaccuracies, right? So makes for a fun day. It's super hot out too, so tires rubbing a little bit when I turn. You can smell the rubber, so I might need to do a little bit more rolling in the front, but that's no big deal. But yeah, no, the car runs good. I'm happy with the overall performance. We'll do a few tweaks when I get back from Texas, and you know, get that disc setup done, see about that panhard bar, get the exhaust redone. bit, enjoy my ride in this thing before I put it away. So I'm just glad I managed to get it back on the ground and rolling before I headed south. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. We're going to see you guys from Texas. So see you guys then.